I'm Gretchen, and this is the Barber Farm in Jericho, Vermont. I grew up here. My parents farmed, there was an endless supply of strawberries, and I always had a sister, cousin, or friend to play with. It was idyllic, and by the time I was a teenager, I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there. But I always loved the farm, and I could never stay away for too long. The Barber Farm is magical. It's a beautiful place with a rich history. But no one had farmed there since I was 10. And by the time I was 25, it didn't seem like it would ever be farmed again. My grandmother, who owned the land, was getting older. Her kids, my mom and my aunts and uncles, were arguing about what should happen. No one saw a future in farming, but not everyone was ready to see it developed.
There are certain elements of this story that are similar to stories we see unfolding on other farms throughout Vermont. When we start working with families, it's often the case that it's at a juncture of an intergenerational transfer. There either isn't somebody in the family of an age or who lives in the area or with an interest to farm the land. And at those times, the financially highest and best use of the land is not often keeping it as farmland. And if that land is converted to other uses, the chances of it being available for farming in the future, if possible at all, can be incredibly slim.
I was in film school at the time and decided to make a movie about what was going on. If the Barber Farm was going to disappear, like so many other places in Vermont, I wanted to at least have a record of it. So in 2003, I borrowed a mini DV camcorder and began what was supposed to be a 3-month video project telling the story of my family on the Barber Farm.
We bought the farm in September of 1948 when your grandfather decided to not farm anymore. Glenn rented it for a while. Then after he quit farming, your folks started the strawberries and vegetable business. Now I just have grass that's growing and nobody wants. You know, I'll be 90 before long, and if I don't get the darn thing straightened out before I die,
it will be developed.
It's going to be in probate court, and you're going to lose half of it anyways.
I mean, how is it going to turn out? I don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't know. It's Mom's land, and she can do anything she wants with it.
follow me?
However, what she chooses to do with it can make so much difference in the future of this land and how it's viewed and even the memory of her.
How much of your food comes from your garden?
Summertime. Well, except my breads and meats, it all comes from my garden. I don't eat the fish worms, so I don't get my meat from the garden. I gotta go check out this compost. That nice black soil.
Where did you get that from?
Got it from the Davis farm over on Silly Hill Road. They're selling it, hope to sell it, to supplement their low income from low milk prices. A lot of them trying to do something different because the milk price is so darn low that they can't make a living at it. It's sad.
This wasn't anything new. Farming had always been hard, and farmers had always looked for creative solutions. Even the Barbers, for whom the farm was named, had tried out agritourism long before that was even a thing.
They had a hard time paying off their mortgage. Mrs. Barber had relatives out Ohio area and they urged her to take summer boarders.
Many of the same families have been coming back to the Barber farm for generations.
It's a wonderful place to come to.
Yeah, everybody wanted to come.
It was just Shangri-La in the summertime. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a place.
While many people came to the Barber farm for summer vacation, it was always work for my family.
See the deer tracks right there? See there? Stepped right on my radishes.
There, come back up. That one's coming up where the hole is. Farmed all my life, you know. I took it over in '69.
Are these radishes or weeds?
Yeah.
Dad was sick of it, so I leased the farm and bought the cows, and I went back at it. I was in it for quite a long time, but then farming started going downhill because milk prices were going down and people were just going belly up. And I was in the process of buying the farm, but then when I see how things were going, I said, no sense of losing my shirt and losing everything else. So I got out of it.
Sad to see him quit, but in one way, but in the other way, you knew it was a hard life. And by that time, he could earn a better living doing something else. Like when your folks started doing vegetables and so on. Nice to see somebody use the land for something that was productive and so on. But it was a hard life. You were dependent on the weather, and the weatherman doesn't always cooperate with what you want to do.
We had a hailstorm hit just before strawberry picking one year. We had a 26-degree frost on the 12th of June.
Oh my gosh.
And the following year, it didn't rain from about the 1st of April till the 12th of May. Crops were burning up. But geez, there were moments. You take a walk up on the high field and you look down across these 30 acres that are in neat, straight, weed-free rows of sprouts, bright green, and there are parts of it I really do miss.
And that's all farming was in 2003. Sweet memories. No one saw a future.
We may have like 3 farms in town.
And there used to be something like 40 or more.
You know, it's life, I guess. It goes on. Not always the way we want it. The last 2 years, we've had trouble finding anybody to even cut the hay.
There's very few people that are just out there haying small fields.
Put an ad in the paper, don't get any response. I've done that for several years. Nobody calls, nobody wants it. You probably aren't familiar, they call it the Tyler Farm. They have now sold it to Snyder Development. They're going to put in 22 upscale houses over there.
Oh, wow. What do you think of that?
I hate to see those things happen in Vermont, but what can you do? If the farmers can't make a decent living, or even a living to just make ends meet, they're not going to stay in business. And when the farmers go out, what's the alternative? Only development. I'm surprised that I haven't had anything from Snyder's, but I haven't. Probably the word is out that it isn't for sale anyway.
Despite what my grandmother said, everyone figured the farm would be developed eventually.
This will all be built up with homes someday.
I hope not.
Oh, you live to see it. I probably won't.
I still hope not.
Everyone would love to see it left open.
You know, I'd like to see this place saved.
But in reality, I think that everybody tends to think of their pocketbook too.
You gotta have money to do that, and Grandma's not getting any younger, so I don't know what's gonna, time will tell, I guess, what we do, but hopefully we can save some of it.
Could we save some of it? And what did that even mean anyway? I didn't know, so I took my questions to the local land trust.
You know, this is an exciting time. We have these choices before us, and we can either make the most of it or we can hope things don't happen and not plan and then go, well, how could those houses go right there and spoil the view?
She told me about conservation easements, which can permanently protect farmland from development.
Conservation easements are tailored according to what the landowner wants to see happen. Land trust sits down with the landowner and says, and the family, and says, what do you perceive happening now and in the future? Do you see yourselves never needing to develop? Do you see a section of land that you'd like to keep open? And the easement is written around the landowner's ideas.
Working with the land trust sounded great, but it wasn't a realistic possibility. Not everyone in the family wanted to conserve the land, and no one wanted to farm it. And then my grandmother got a call. There was someone who actually wanted her hay.
It had to be organic because this guy wants to get into organic farming himself. So I was very fortunate. He took what he thought was any good and mowed the rest and left it laying on the ground.
This was good news and all, but it wasn't going to be our answer for saving the farm.
Got more pictures of me now, Gretchen.
I worry that in the end, that people might say, why in the world didn't we sit down and talk? We could have kept this from happening, or we could have done this long ago. When that discussion will all take place is when Mom dies, or when she is incapable of making her own decisions, or when she invites everyone in to have a conversation.
Well, I guess that's it.
You can't keep waiting and waiting and waiting.
The project was a thesis, and I needed to wrap the movie up before anything actually resolved. So I closed it off with a cliffhanger and a wish for the Barber farm.
Here's to Doris.
Finest woman I ever met.
What about 90 more? Oh, you bet. Can't see a wrinkle or anything, can you?
This could turn out to be a eulogy for the Barber farm, a collection of stories and memories about a place destined to disappear. But I hope instead that it'll serve as a catalyst, a reminder to my family of how special this farm is and how important it is that we preserve it. So that when we watch this movie in the future, it'll be a celebration of what we worked together to save, and not a lament for all that we lost.
Dear Grandma, happy birthday to you.
Dreams be sweet, fly above the stars, just remember to come back down.
It was 2005 by the time I finished editing my movie and was ready to share it. And by then, things were already changing.
Some of the discussions that were brought up in 2003 about the Tyler farm. Now we own 280 acres of the Tyler farm. We worked with the Snyder companies. I was rather surprised to get a phone call from them asking if we, the local land trust, would be interested in talking to them. And I said, sure, but why? And it was a very, very nice phone call and a subsequent meeting saying, one, we want to see this land remain in agriculture. We also want to see the trails continue to be accessed by the public. So they saw that the local land trust coming in, permanently protecting that land, would guarantee that those uses would continue.
The situation was changing for agriculture too. And all of a sudden, small farms and organic food seemed much more viable in Vermont.
I'm Krista Alexander, and it's my husband Mark Foshing, and we run Jericho Settlers Farm. We started on my parents' property just up the road from here. We were working full-time jobs off the farm, and we basically had a roadside vegetable stand. As soon as we got going, the demand was huge, and our neighbors and friends were all like, can we buy some of your chickens? Things we were raising for ourselves, they wanted to buy off of us. So we were like, okay, we'll expand, we'll do a little more. There's been an explosion in farmers markets, not just in Vermont, across the country. The number of farmers markets and the amount of money being spent at farmers markets has been astronomical. And with that, of course, has been the number of farms.
Having those small farms remain part of our communities is going to make a big difference in the way these communities evolve over time. When you realize the importance of having sources of local food, it's not a big jump to know that we need to have the land base to support that into the future.
2006 was a good year. I was a newlywed, my film was making it into festivals, and my grandmother finally reached out to talk to the Vermont Land Trust.
So I started talking with Doris. She, I think, really wanted to do what was best for the land, and was also very concerned about doing what's best for all of her children.
My grandmother had 5 children to consider, and they didn't all agree on what should happen to the farm. My mother was pushing hardest for conservation, but her brothers and sisters had different opinions. And with this pressure from both sides, my grandmother again delayed making any kind of a decision.
I never got involved in this land trust because I never could quite figure out how the land trust was going to be able to, over the period of years, to manage what they were trying to do and wanted to do and was a good thing to do. But how were they going to do it was my problem. A little bit skeptical, I guess.
But it was more than just my grandmother's skepticism that prevented her from conserving the farm.
When we look at conserving a property, a good litmus test for us is, what is the use of the farm right now?
Without someone who is interested in doing more than just haying the fields, there was little chance for my grandmother or anyone else to conserve the farm.
To think down the future for this land would be very difficult for me to even make a prediction.
But then something remarkable happened.
Mark Fashing saw the film, and they were just getting started farming, and they lived just up the road.
Watching that film and listening to the folks in the film talk about the land and their connection to it, and seeing the aerial shots of how big it was, it's like, wow, this is like right out our back door. This would be a wonderful opportunity. These are people on this land who are saddened about what might happen with the land, and maybe there's a possibility that we as young farmers starting up could use it, and it would work with people that live here, and it would work for us. So right after that film, I introduced myself and said, hey, we were running a small farm up the road, and said, if you're ever interested in having someone farm it, let us know. And it took off from there.
By the next summer, Mark and Krista were renting some land, and the Barber farm was a working farm again.
In a way, the film was a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you build it, they will come.
Well, I'm happy to know that it's being used, and the guy seems to be doing a very good job.
Well, we're ripping out more garlic because it's garlic harvest season. So we've probably got about 5 or 6 rows of garlic to pull out, and then that'll go in the barn to cure. And then I need to do some weeding with the tractors, cultivate the weeds out, and then go see my boy play soccer. That's part of the day for me.
Though my grandmother was happy to see the farm being used, she was still a skeptic when it came to small-scale organic farming.
They get a price for eggs that you just wouldn't believe. That's good for me, because they're going to continue to rent the land if they can make the money that way. Most people say, I can't afford it, can't afford that price.
She was skeptical, but she was still hopeful. And now that they had found someone to rent the land, my parents were able to convince my grandmother to finally settle the future of the farm.
Well, the initial thing when we bought the land is we just want to try to keep this from getting split up, and we thought that that was just the first thing on my mind. But there was no definite plan.
When I sold the land to you folks, it was agreed that they were not going to build houses on it.
While we didn't have anything written in the deed that it will not be developed, we told her that it would not be developed. And, we took that as seriously as if it had been written in ink. When she sold it to her, she was 94. So it was getting time to make a decision.
For 20 years, Mom has been thinking, worrying, trying to figure out what she was going to do with this land, how she was going to solve this problem. And I think that it ate at her.
I couldn't carry it on any longer. And I was glad that somebody in the family was going to try to do something with it. And I thought to myself, I wonder what they think they can do, because I knew that your father was not going to be a farmer.
But my dad was a farmer, and before long, he was farming again. This time, though, it was for the food bank.
I've been landscaping for 20 years, had small gardens, nothing. And I just had to grow something, so put in this whole patch was in potatoes. That first year that I got involved with the food bank.
Charlie's been really generous and he's done a great job here. We're very, very excited and honored.
I don't know, figure there's around 5-6 tons. I mean, it looks like such a stupidly large amount of food, and it lasts such a stupidly small amount of time.
What do you call a potato that's a monk?
I don't know.
A meditator.
Oh.
How you like that, Joy?
I love it.
All right.
By then, I had a daughter, Claire. So did my sister, and my grandmother had a few more great-grandkids from my cousins. There was another generation on the farm.
I think that it was her last Mother's Day, that the Fashings were farming here, and there were all the animals out in the field, cows, pigs, chickens, and I offered to take her for a ride over in the field so that she could see the animals. And when we got back, she said, "This is the best present you could have ever given me." We had purchased the farm and found someone to farm it, and she could see it being farmed again.
She could see it being improved and the animals grazing things down and keeping things green and people making a living farming here. She loved the place.
Even though they'd made a personal commitment to conservation, my parents wanted to officially protect the farm now that they owned it.
We could commit to ourselves that we're never going to develop this, but when we died, it would be the same problem that Mom was facing. That was one thing that we didn't want to have happen.
We got hold of the land trust and have been working on it for 18 months steadily, pretty much. We were told that the hearing was January 21st of 2010. Down we went to Montpelier and made our case.
We spoke briefly on what the farm meant to us and why we felt that it should be conserved. And then 2 hours later in the day, we got a phone call that they would go ahead and conserve it.
What's been really strange is thinking of all the people to whom this meant so much who are now passed on. Jeannie's mom and dad and dozens of summer residents who just loved this place and who esteemed it as it was. And it's just really cool to think that it is as it shall be.
Yeah, it felt like we were really doing this for a whole lot of people that aren't even around yet, and a whole lot of people that passed, that it really had more to do with that than ourselves.
Hi, Mommy.
Hi, Claire.
This is funny chicken.
Yeah, they are funny.
Hi, chicken.
You ready to go, my little chicken?
Don't turn it off.
Well, I gotta turn it off, otherwise the battery goes dead.
Claire, do you think that you'll be a farmer someday?
I am a farmer. Turn it on again.
We're taught that if you want to make a wish come true, you have to keep it a secret. But I don't believe that. I think that the best way to make a wish come true is to shout it out loud. That's what happened with my first movie. I made my wish out loud, and it made it to the right ears. Just the act of telling the story had the power to change the ending.
It's just so exciting that here you are, and the story is what it is instead of something else that it could have been. The Barber Farm gives us all hope. There are ways of keeping land in agriculture that benefit all of us, and it's just putting all the pieces together.
And now, more than 12 years after I started, it's finally time to end this project. But the problem is, even though it's going to be farmland forever, things on the Barber Farm keep changing. My father's already retired, but he's more into farming than ever, and he's making his wish out loud to grow more and more food for the food bank. The Jericho Settlers lease is almost up, and now there's an abundance of young farmers who would love a chance to lease the Barber Farm. And who knows what'll happen when Claire grows up. She still wants to be a farmer, but she wants to be a filmmaker too, like her mom. So I'll leave it to her to tell the continuing story of the Barber Farm.
Fly above the stars, just remember to come back down.